Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayat. Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Bhagavati Ruttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. Omajnanatimirandasya Gnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gauravakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 13. Description of the descendants of Dhruva Maharaj. Prthu Goswami, continuing to speak to all the rishis, headed by Shaunaka, said, after hearing Maitreya Rishi describe Dhruva Maharaj's ascent to Lord Vishnu's abode, Vidura became very much enlightened in devotional emotion and he inquired from Maitreya as follows. Vidura inquired from Maitreya, O greatly advanced devotee, who were the Prachetas? Why Vidura is asking this? Because last three, four verses of the previous chapter, Narada goes and glorifies Dhruva Maharaj in front of Prachetas. So Vidura is very, very alert in his Shravanam. So he's asking, who are the Prachetas? To which family did they belong? Whose sons were they? And where did they perform the great sacrifice? Because Narada says that Prachetas, in the arena of their sacrifice, Narada spoke. Maitreya says that Narada spoke about Dhruva Maharaj to the Prachetas. Vidura continued, I know that the great sage Narada is the greatest of all devotees. He's compiled the Pancharatrika procedure of devotional service and has directly met the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this is Pancharatrika procedure of devotional service. We adopt our deity worship mainly from this. While all the Prachetas were executing religious rituals and sacrificial ceremonies and thus worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead for his satisfaction, the great sage Narada described the transcendental qualities of Dhruva Maharaj. My dear Brahmana, how did Narada Muni glorify the Supreme Personality of Godhead? What pastimes were described in that meeting? I am very eager to hear of them. Kindly explain fully about that glorification of the Lord. The Vidura is so inquisitive. Even though he knows, he's heard so much, he's himself a personal associate of the Lord, still he's saying, how did Narada Muni glorify? Because every devotee has his own, his own flavor of, you know, um, each relationship is unique. So everybody has their own feelings towards the Lord and they have their own way of glorifying the Lord. So how did Narada Muni glorify? And glorification means some pastimes were discussed. What pastimes were described? And I'm very eager to hear of them. And so this is the qualification to actually go back home, back to God, is to become very eager to hear about Krishna. In the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, all the rishis say mm, that we are very eager to hear. So that eagerness is required. That's why Prabhupada says that that eagerness on the part of the audience and somebody who is coming in the disciplic succession, who is authentic speaker, mm, that is a good combination for benefiting both the speaker and the hearer. The great sage Maitreya replied, my dear Vidura, when Dhruva Maharaj departed to for the forest, his son Utkala did not desire to accept the opulent throne of his father, which was meant for the ruler of all the lands of this planet. From his very birth, Utkala was fully satisfied and unattached to the world. He was equipoised, for he could see everything resting in the super soul and the super soul present in everyone's heart. So, Brahmabhuta Jiva, liberated soul. By expansion of his knowledge of the Supreme Brahman, he had already attained liberation from the bondage of the body. This liberation is known as nirvana. He was situated in transcendental bliss and he continued always in that blissful existence which expanded more and more. This was possible for him by continual practice of bhakti yoga, which is compared to fire because it burns away all dirty material things. Bhakti yoga is compared to fire because it burns away all dirty material things. It has to burn away. Bhakti yoga has to burn away all these dirty material things. Cheto darpanamarjanam. But what does it depend on? What does this burning away depend on? Anybody? Why is it that dirty things go away very quickly for some and not very quickly for others?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Faith and surrender.
Okay. Faith and surrender. Okay. Yeah, Shashank Prabhu.
Surrender on Krishna Prabhu. Surrender
Okay.
for Krishna.
Okay. Anything else?
Previous Vasana Prabhu.
Previous Vasana, no. Previous Vasana has no position to stand in front of Bhakti Yoga. But yeah, previous Vasanas can pull us down. Yeah, okay. Prabha Prabhu.
I think the serious endeavor is missing.
Yeah, that's the key. So the whole, this simple, I mean, every time anything comes with respect to spiritual progress, just remember these two things: serious, sincere, serious, sincere. The more serious, the more sincere we are, the more quickly things will get cleared off. Because the process is extremely powerful. Bhakti Yoga process is super powerful. It's like the sun. Sun is always very powerful. Who is out there completely in the sun, he will get the full benefit of the sun. But if somebody is sitting inside the house and cribbing saying that there's no sunlight, then it's his problem. So it's like that. We have to go to the sun. We have to go and soak into the intensity of Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga by nature. That is why Bhakti Yoga is compared to fire. Now, when you put anything to fire, it will burn, right? But you have to put it properly. So if you become sincere, serious, follow whatever has been given, rules, regulations, etc. Associate with the right kind of devotees, then yeah, it will burn. It will burn. There's no doubt about that. He was always situated in his constitutional position of self-realization, and he could not see anything else but the Supreme Lord and himself engaged in discharging devotional service. Utkal appeared to the less intelligent persons on the road to be foolish, blind, dumb, deaf, and mad, although actually he was not so. He remained like fire covered with ashes, without blazing flames. This is again like Jada Bharat. So many devotees actually we see this that externally they just don't want to associate with all these material people, so they just act like foolish, so that nobody wants to interact with them. For this reason, the ministers and all the elderly members of the family thought Utkala to be without intelligence and in fact mad. Thus his younger brother, named Vatsara, the son of Brahmi, was elevated to the royal throne and he became the king of the world. King Vatsara had a very dear wife whose name was Swarvithi. And she gave birth to 6 sons named Pushparna, Tigmaketu, Isha, Urja, Vasu, and Jaya. Pushparna had 2 wives named Prabha and Dosha. Prabha had 3 sons named Pratar, Madhyandinam, and Sayam. And Dosha had 3 sons, Pradosha, Nishita, Vyushta. Vyushta's wife was named Pushkarini, and she gave birth to a very powerful same named Sarvateja. Sarvateja's wife Akuti gave birth to a son named Chakshusha, who became the 6th Manu at the end of the Manu millennium. And these descendants are all important to hear because suddenly in the middle there will be some very important person like this. And Chakshusha Manu. Manus are all very important personalities. Nadvala, the wife of Chakshusha Manu, gave birth to the following faultless sons: Puru, Putsa, Trita, Dyumna, Satyavan, Rita, Vrata, Agnishtoma, Atiratra, Pradyumna, Shibi, and Ulmukha. Of the 12 sons, Ulmukha begot 6 sons in his wife Pushkarini. They were all very good sons, and their names were Anga, Sumana, Khyati, Kratu, Angira, and Gaya. The wife of Anga, Sunitha. Now we are coming to the plot, the central theme. The wife of Anga, Sunitha, gave birth to a son named Vena, who was very crooked. The saintly king Anga was very disappointed with Vena's bad character, and he left home and kingdom and went out to the forest. My dear Vidura, when great sages curse, their words are as invincible as a thunderbolt. Thus, When they cursed King Vena out of anger, he died. After his death, since there was no king, all the rogues and thieves flourished. The kingdom became unregulated, and all the citizens suffered greatly. On seeing this, the great sages took the right hand of Vena as a churning rod, and as a result of their churning, Lord Vishnu, in his partial representation, made his advent as King Prthu, the original emperor of the world. Now we should understand he is a partial representation. He is actually a Shaktavesha avatar. Shaktavesha means a jiva who has been endowed with uh, power, special power by the Lord. So very little mm, um, prowess or qualities of the Lord will manifest in such a jiva. But some very specific activity has to be accomplished. So Lord, like that Avesha, he empowers its soul. Vidura inquired from the sage Maitreya, my dear Brahmana, King Anga was very gentle. He had high character and was a saintly personality and lover of Brahminical culture. Anga was very good. Mm. How is it that such a great soul got a bad son like Vena, because of whom he became indifferent to his kingdom and left it? See, Vidura is asking such intelligent questions. Mm. That's why always devotees should be thoughtful. We should be thinking. Whenever we hear anything, we should keep thinking, oh, why is this? And then a lot more secrets about this material world will be revealed. King Anga was gentle. He was a great soul. But how did he get a bad son like Vena? It was so bad that sages actually cursed him to death. Vidura also inquired, how is it that the great sages, who were completely conversant with religious principles, desired to curse King Vena, who himself carried the rod of punishment because he was a king, and thus awarded him the greatest punishment, Brahma Shapa. So they curse him. So both are intriguing. Why is this? How come? It is the duty of all citizens in a state never to insult the king, even though he sometimes appears to have done something very sinful. Sometimes, not all the time. Because of his prowess, the king is always more influential than all other ruling chiefs. So how is that the citizens also insulted the king? Because they let him cursed, become cursed. Vidura requested Maitreya, my dear Brahmana, you are well conversant with all subjects, both past and future. Therefore, I wish to hear from you all the activities of King Vena. I am your faithful devotee, so please explain this. Sri Maitreya replied, my dear Vidura, once the great king Anga arranged to perform the great sacrifice known as Ashwamedha. All the expert Brahmanas present knew how to invite the demigods, but in spite of their efforts, no demigods participated or appeared in that sacrifice. The priests engaged in the sacrifice then informed King Anga, O king, we are properly offering the clarified butter in the sacrifice, but despite all our efforts, the demigods do not accept it. O king, we know that the paraphernalia to perform the sacrifice is well collected by you with great faith and care and is not polluted. Our chanting of the Vedic hymns is also not deficient in any way, for all the Brahmanas and priests present here are expert and are executing the performances properly. Dear king, we do not find any reason that the demigods should feel insulted or neglected in any way, but still the demigods who are witnesses for the sacrifice do not accept their shares. We do not know why this is so. Maitreya explained that King Anga, after hearing the statements of the priests, was greatly aggrieved. At that time, he took permission from the priests to break his silence and inquired from all the priests who were present in the sacrificial arena. King Anga says, my dear priest, kindly tell me what offense I have committed. Although invited, the demigods are neither taking part in the sacrifice nor accepting their shares. The head priest said, O king, in this life we do not find any sinful activity even within your mind. They are not in the least offensive, but we can see that in your previous life you performed sinful activities due to which, in spite of you are having all qualifications, you have no son. Now, something else, it gets deviated to some other topic. Now, question was why are they not accepting? But now priests reveal saying that okay, due to some sinful activities, you don't have a son. O king, we wish all good fortune for you. You have no son. But if you pray at once to the Supreme Lord and ask for a son, and if you execute the sacrifice for that purpose, the enjoyer of the sacrifice, the Supreme Person of Godhead, will fulfill your desire. Of course, this is not recommended generally for some personal motive. worshipping the Supreme Lord. Now, one way it can be said that okay, Anga is a king, so he had to have a hair, and ruling is he's a representative of the Supreme Lord, so he can take shelter of Supreme Lord for getting a son. But yeah, otherwise not. So yeah, and also for one way of thinking, another way of thinking is for getting a son. That why should one go to Supreme Lord? Looking at it the other way, anyway, Bhagavatam says akamasa, vakamo, va moksha kamo dari. For everything come to me. So yeah, different ways of different. Prabhupada used to say always, we have to see the Shastra from different angles of vision, and not whimsically, but based on what Acharyas have written, Prabhupada has written. When Hari, the supreme enjoyer of all sacrifices, is invited to fulfill your desire for a son, all the demigods will come with him and take their shares in the sacrifice. So demigods are not coming, but when Supreme Lord comes, then all the demigods will come. Because the question is, if Supreme Lord comes, that is good enough. Why do we have to think about demigods coming? So that's not high platform. The performer of the sacrifices under Karma Kanda activities achieves the fulfillment of the desire for which he worships the Lord. Thus, for the sake of a son for King Anga, they decide to offer oblations to Lord Vishnu, who is situated in the hearts of all living entities. As soon as the oblation was offered in the fire, a person appeared from the fire altar wearing a golden garland and a white dress. He was carrying a golden pot filled with rice boiled in milk. The king was very liberal, and after taking permission from the priest, he took the preparation in his joined palms, and after smelling it, he offered a portion to his wife. Although the queen had no son, after eating that food which had the power to produce a male child, she became pregnant by her husband, and in due course of time she gave birth to a son. That boy was born partially in the dynasty of irreligion. Why? Because his grandfather, with his Sunita's father, Sunita's father, mother, so on mother's side, his grandfather was death personified. And the boy grew up as his follower. He became a greatly irreligious person. So the question is, if son is bad, so it could be either due to the father side or mother side. And here it is due to mother side. Mm. He was born partially in the dynasty of religion, partially in the dynasty of religion. So on the mother side, he is born in the dynasty of religion. Mm. That is why actually, marriage means all these things have to be seen. Of course, this looks like it was ordained. After fixing his bow and arrow, the cruel boy used to go to the forest and unnecessarily kill innocent deer. And as soon as he came, all the people would cry, "Oh, here comes cruel Vena! Here comes cruel Vena!" The boy was so cruel that while playing with young boys of his age, he would kill them very mercilessly, as if they were animals meant for slaughter. Just imagine. After seeing the cruel and merciless behavior of his son Vena, King Anga punished him in different ways to reform him, but was unable to bring him to the path of gentleness. He thus became greatly aggrieved. King thought to himself, persons who have no son are certainly fortunate. They must have worshipped the Lord in their previous life so that they would not have to suffer the unbearable unhappiness caused by a bad son. So this is a good lesson actually. This is a good line of thought for many devotee couples who don't have children and they're very disturbed by that. But we can see Lord protects his devotees. It's better to have no son than having a bad son. Mm. A sinful son causes a person's reputation to vanish. His irreligious activities at home cause irreligion and quarrel among everyone, and this creates only endless anxiety. Who, if he is considerate and intelligent, would desire such a worthless son? Such a son is nothing but a bond of illusion for the living entity, and he makes one's home miserable. Of course, elsewhere, Bhagavatam says it's better to have a worthless son than a worthy son, because if somebody has a worthy son, then they become attached to him, and that becomes illusion. There is a worthless son or bad family, then yeah, it becomes impetus for renunciation. Then the king thought, this is like, Prabhupada was not happy marrying his wife, he said, his father sets up the, marriage, and then God says, I don't like her, so I want to marry once more. God Mohanday says, no, no, no. Okay, this will be a cause for your renunciation of this material world. Like that. Then the king thought, a bad son is better than a good son because a good son creates an attachment. Yeah, okay, you don't need that. For home, whereas a bad son does not. A bad son creates a hellish home from which an intelligent man naturally becomes very easily detached. Thinking like that, King Anga could not sleep at night. He became completely indifferent to household life. Once, therefore, in the dead of night, he got up from the bed and left Vena's mother, who was sleeping deeply. He gave up all attraction for his greatly opulent kingdom, and unseen by anyone, he very silently gave up his home and opulence and proceeded towards the forest. So, everybody, all of us, at some stage in our life, we should be ready to do this. Not that we have to do it, but yeah, we should be completely detached with home and opulence and all these things, and focus our full energies on Krishna and Krishna's service. When it was understood that the king had indifferently left home, all the citizens, priests, ministers, friends, and people in general were greatly aggrieved. They began to search for him all over the world, just as a less experienced mystic searches out the super soul within himself. When the citizens could not find any trace of the king after searching for him everywhere, they were very disappointed, and they returned to the city where all the great sages of the country assembled because of the king's absence. So all the great sages assembled together. With tears in their eyes, the citizens offered respectful obeisances and informed the sages in full detail that they were unable to find the king anywhere. The story of King Vena. The great sage Maitreya continued, O great hero Vidura, the great sages headed by Bhrigu were always thinking of the welfare of the people in general. When they saw that in the absence of King Anga there was no one to protect the interests of the people, they understood that without a ruler, the people would become independent and non-regulated. Uh, it is also true, without if the head of the family is not responsible, then everybody in the house will also become independent and non-regulated. Mm. The great sages then called for the queen mother Sunitha, and with her permission, they installed Vena on the throne as master of the world. All the ministers, however, disagreed with this. It was already known that Vena was very severe and cruel. Therefore, as soon as all the thieves and rogues in the state heard of his ascendance to the royal throne, they became very much afraid of him. Indeed, they hid themselves here and there as rats hide themselves from snakes. So one good thing happened. At least all the rogues and thieves were, uh, did not, and they were left at bay. Hmm. But then the king himself was so cruel, so there's no need for other thieves and rogues. He was good enough thief and rogue uh, in the helm of things. When the king ascended to the throne, he became all powerful with 8 kinds of opulences. Consequently, he became too proud. By virtue of his false prestige, he considered himself to be greater than anyone. Thus, he began to insult great personalities. When he became overly blind due to his opulences, King Vena mounted a chariot and, like an uncontrolled elephant, began to travel through the kingdom, causing the sky and earth to tremble wherever he went. All the twice born Brahmanas were forbidden henceforward to perform any sacrifice, and they were also forbidden to give charity or offer clarified butter. Thus, King Vena sounded kettle drums throughout the countryside. In other words, he stopped all kinds of religious rituals. Therefore, all the great sages assembled together, and after observing cruel Vena's atrocities, concluded that a great danger and catastrophe was approaching the people of the world. Why such a ruler means no dharma, no dharmic, no rituals, nothing. Mm. So they decide that it's a great danger and catastrophe. Just imagine all the modern administrators, rulers, politicians, they all belong to this family of Vena. They are mostly everybody's atheist. Thus, out of compassion, they began to talk amongst themselves, for they themselves were the performers of the sacrifices. When the great sages consulted one another, they saw that the people were in a dangerous position from both directions. When a fire blazes on both sides of a log, the ants in the middle are in a very dangerous situation. Similarly, at the time of the people in general were in a dangerous position due to an irresponsible king on one side and thieves and rogues on the other. Thinking to save the state from irregularity, the sages began to consider that it was due to a political crisis that they made Vena king, although he was not qualified. What was the political crisis? That there was no king was a political crisis. But now the king himself became the political crisis. But alas, now the people were being disturbed by the king himself. Under such circumstances, how could the people be happy? So the original reason why they put Vena on the throne was that, so there is some protection, so people can be happy. Sages began to think within themselves. Because he was born from the womb of Sunita, King Vena is by nature very mischievous. Supporting this mischievous king is exactly like maintaining a snake with milk. Now he has become a source of all difficulties. We appointed this Vena king of the state in order to give protection to the citizens, but now he has become the enemy of the citizens. Despite all these discrepancies, we should at once try to pacify him. By doing so, we may not be touched by the sinful results caused by him because they became responsible for this action. So they're thinking, oh, now he's doing all sinful stuff and we'll be touched by the sinful results. Because we were instrumental in bringing him to power. But we should at least at once we should try to pacify him. So meaning make him stop all his atrocities. So then he will be independent in his wrongdoings and he will only reap the results. We won't be touched by it. So this shows that if we are part of a decision, we are also part of the result. Mm. Remotely, directly, however it is. And also when some wrong things are being done, not uh, protesting also is accepting. And therefore, we'll also have to mm, accept some will be touched by the sinful results. The saintly sages continued thinking, of course, we were completely aware of his mischievous nature. Yet we nevertheless enthroned Vena. If we cannot persuade King Vena to accept our advice, he will be condemned by the public and we will join them. Thus, by our prowess, we shall burn him to ashes. So complex situation said, yeah, we knew that he was bad, still we enthroned. Anyway, but we need to try and rectify the mistake. So we'll try to persuade king to accept our advice. If he doesn't accept, then all the public will condemn the king because kings are supposed to follow the sages. And then we'll also join them. And then by our prowess, we shall burn him to ashes. The great sages, having thus decided, approached King Vena. Concealing their real anger, they pacified him with sweet words and then spoke as follows. Great sages said, dear king, we have come to give you good advice. Kindly hear us with great attention. By doing so, your duration of life and your opulence, strength, and reputation will increase. Those who live according to religious principles and who follow them by words, mind, body, and intelligence are elevated to the heavenly kingdom, which is devoid of all miseries. Just going to Swarga by following Dharma. This is Samanya Sadharana Dharma, like normal Varnashrama Dharma. Being thus rid of the material influence, they achieve unlimited happiness in life. The sages continued, O great hero, for this reason you should not be the cause of spoiling the spiritual life of the great general populace. If the spiritual life is spoiled because of your activities, you will certainly fall down from your opulent and royal position. 90 persons continued, when the king protects the citizens from the disturbances of mischievous ministers, as well as from thieves and rogues, he can, by virtue of such pious activities, accept taxes given by his subjects. Thus, a pious king can certainly enjoy himself in this world as well as in the life after death. So, this is why a king is preferred because he's going to keep all the bad ministers away and thieves and rogues away. That is why monarchy is better. Because if it is democracy, then the main person also is a minister. And yeah, their job is to just loot the people. And if there's a pious king, he will prevent such bad ministers and thieves and rogues from affecting people's lives. So then he enjoys himself in this world as well as in life after death because this is his duty, prescribed duty. The king is supposed to be pious, in whose state and cities the general populace strictly observes the system of 8 social orders of Varna and Ashrama, and where all citizens engage in worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead by their particular occupations. So this is the Varnashrama system. Hmm. So one has to strictly follow the Varna and Ashrama and follow their particular duties. And in doing so, and they engage in worshipping the Supreme Lord, because the whole system is given by the Supreme Lord. O noble one, if the king sees that the Supreme Person of Godhead, the original source of the cosmic manifestation, and the super soul within everyone is worshipped, the Lord will be satisfied. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is worshipped by the great demigods who are controllers of universal affairs. So they're saying, yeah, so you're just not like a demigod. You're also one of the kings, so you also have to worship the Supreme Lord. When he is satisfied, nothing is impossible to achieve. For this reason, all the demigods, presiding deities of different planets, as well as the inhabitants of their planets, take great pleasure in offering all kinds of paraphernalia for his worship. Dear King, the Supreme Person of Godhead, along with the predominating deities, is the enjoyer of the results of all sacrifices in all planets. The Supreme Lord is the sum total of the 3 Vedas, the owner of everything, and the ultimate goal of all austerity. Therefore, your countrymen should engage in performing various sacrifices for your elevation. Indeed, you should always direct them towards the offering of sacrifices. So, if the citizens follow Varnashrama, then the king is elevated. So the sages are saying, encourage this Varnashrama, help your citizens to actually follow the rules and regulations and do their prescribed duties, so that and they will worship the Supreme Lord indirectly, and by them doing so, you will become elevated because you provided the facility for this. And anyway, all great demigods also do that, uh, because he is the enjoyer. Supreme Lord is the enjoyer of all sacrifices, results of all sacrifices. So do that. When all the Brahmanas engaged in performing sacrifices in your kingdom, all the demigods who are plenary expansions of the Lord will be very much satisfied by their activities and will give you your desired result. Therefore, O hero, do not stop the sacrificial performances. If you stop them, you will disrespect the demigods. So they're trying to help Vena understand his little position, small position. But King Vena was born in the family of irreligion. King Vena replied, you are not at all experienced. It is very much regrettable that you are maintaining something which is not religious and are accepting it as religious, which is what Vena was doing. But he is telling the sages that you are thinking what is religion, you are considering it as irreligion. And irreligion you are considering as religion. Indeed, I think you are giving up your real husband who maintains you and are searching after some paramour to worship. Those who, out of gross ignorance, do not worship the king, who is actually the Supreme Person of Godhead. Now, he is not actually the Supreme Person of Godhead. He is a representative of Supreme Person of Godhead. But Vena was in ignorance. So those who, out of ignorance, do not worship the king, they experience happiness neither in this world nor in the world after death. So he is thinking that is the regulative principle. That is what people have to do. Worship him because he is the Supreme Lord. Little bit misunderstood. You are so much devoted to the demigods, but who are they? Indeed, your affection for these demigods is exactly like the affection of an unchaste woman who neglects her married life and gives all attention to her paramour. Because again, he is thinking that I am. So all the demigods rest in the body of the king if he is the actual representative of the Supreme Lord. That's what Shastra says. So he's saying, but who are they? They're all in my body. So you have to actually show affection to me. Lord Vishnu, see, is offensive, became offensive now. Lord Vishnu, Brahma, Shiva, Indra, Vayu, Yama, Kuvera, Sun God, Moon God, predominating deity of the earth, Agni, Varuna, all others who are great and competent to bestow benedictions or to curse, all abide in the body of the king. For this reason, the king is known as the reservoir of all demigods, or simply parts and parcels of the king's body. For this reason, O Brahmanas, you should abandon your envy of me, and by your ritualistic activities, you should worship me and not the Supreme Lord, and offer me all paraphernalia. If you are intelligent, you should know that there is no personality superior to me who can accept the first oblations of all sacrifices. Thus, the king who became unintelligent due to his sinful life, the people become unintelligent due to sinful life and deviation from the right path. The main reason is sinful life. He became actually bereft of all good fortune. He could not accept the request of the great sages, which the sages put before him with great respect, and therefore he was condemned. My dear Vidura, all good fortune unto you. The foolish king who thought himself very learned thus insulted the great sages, and the sages, being broken hearted by the king's words, became very angry at him. Why they became angry at him? Because he insulted the Supreme Lord. Even though they clearly explained his position and the Supreme Lord's position, King Vena just includes Vishnu as amongst one of the demigods and just says, in my body I am supreme. So they were very heartbroken. All the great saintly sages immediately cried, kill him, kill him. He's the most dreadful, sinful person. If he lives, he will certainly turn the whole world into ashes in no time. This impious, impudent man does not deserve to sit on the throne at all. He's so shameless that he even dared insult the Supreme Personal Godhead, Lord Vishnu. But for King Vena, who is simply inauspicious, who would blaspheme the Supreme Personal Godhead, by whose mercy one is awarded all kinds of fortune and opulence. The great sages, thus manifesting their covert anger, immediately decided to kill the king. King Vena was already as good as dead due to his blasphemy against the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, without using any weapons, the sages killed Vena simply by high-sounding words. Because he was already dead, pretty much. They didn't have to do much because of his blasphemy. After all the sages returned to their respective hermitages, the mother of King Vena, Sunita, became very much aggrieved because of her son's death. She decided to preserve the dead body of her son by application of certain ingredients and by chanting mantras. Once upon a time, the same saintly persons, after taking their bath in the river Saraswati, began to perform their daily duties by offering oblations into the sacrificial fire. After this, sitting on the bank of the river, they began to talk about the transcendental person and his pastimes. In those days, there were various disturbances in the country that were creating a panic in society. Therefore, all the sages began to talk amongst themselves. Since the king is dead and there is no protector in the world, misfortune may befall the people in general on account of rogues and thieves. When the great sages were carrying on their discussion in this way, they saw a dust storm arising from all directions. This storm was caused by the running of thieves and rogues who were engaged in plundering the citizens. Upon seeing the dust storm, the saintly persons could understand that there were a great deal of irregularities due to the death of King Vena. Without government, the state was devoid of law and order, and consequently, there was a great uprising of murderous thieves and rogues who were plundering the riches of the people in general. Although the great sages could subdue the disturbance by their powers, just as they could kill the king, they considered it improper on their part to do so. It was not their business directly. Thus, they did not attempt to stop the disturbance. The great sages began to think that although Brahmana is peaceful and impartial because he is equal to everyone, it is still not his duty to neglect poor humans. By such neglect, a Brahmana's spiritual power diminishes, just as water kept in a cracked pot leaks out. And so, on one end, they're saying they could take the situation in their hands, but that was not required. Was not correct. But at the same time, they should not ignore also. So they have to do something about it, which is appropriate for them. So the sages decided that the descendants of the family of the saintly King Kanga should not be stopped. For in this family, the semen was very powerful and children were prone to become devotees of the Lord. Powerful semen means children become devotees of the Lord. After making a decision, the saintly persons and sages churned the thighs of the dead body of King Vena with great force and according to a specific method. As a result of this churning, a dwarf-like person was born from King Vena's body. This person born from King Vena's thighs was named Bahuka, and his complexion was as black as a crow's. All the limbs of his body were very short, and dwarfs basically there. And his arms and legs were short, and his jaws were large. His nose was flat, his eyes were reddish, and his hair copper colored. He was very submissive and meek, and immediately after his birth he bowed down and inquired, Sirs, what shall I do? The great sages replied, Please sit down, Nishida in Sanskrit. Thus, Nishada, the father of the Nishada race, was born. After his birth, he immediately took charge of all the resultant actions of King Vena's sinful activities. As such, this Nishada class are always engaged in sinful activities like stealing, plundering, and hunting. Consequently, they are only allowed to live in the hills and forests. So the first churning resulted in this all the person being born who took up all the sinful reactions or sinful actions. So this was this race of people who are engaged in sinful activities called Nishada. Okay. Yeah, so I'll stop here. Then King Prthu's appearance and coronation, etc. We can continue from there. Okay. Yeah. Anything? Any thoughts? Any questions? Nothing. Okay. Yeah, okay. So we'll close here. We'll continue reading.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandavatana.
Yeah, Pranam.
Just one confusion, Prabhu.
Yeah.
Prabhuji, like Sunita's father is death personified. So actually, when we said death person, because sometimes we relate to Yamraj and sometimes to.
No, death personified actually here is just saying that I don't think it's referring to a specific person. Possibly it is just that he was a bad person. One second. Let's see the purport if Prabhupada is written. Was the daughter of death personified? Generally, the daughter receives the qualifications of her father, and the son acquires those of the mother. Okay. No, she was the daughter of death personified. That's all. Okay. Doesn't say who this is. Mitra is Mitra is the son, is death personified. One second. Yeah, I think so. Death person. But here it is not said.
Sometimes don't we relate it even to Krishna, like we say
Yeah, that is he is the Mrityu Sarva
uh,
Harasham, but he's like it's like Sarva Karana Karanam type. But specifically, no, but generally death personified is also like, yeah, like if they are like death, is a death personified. Like, so I'm not sure if this is referring to a person or generally just a bad person. Yeah, just says death personified.
Because now Prthu Maharaj will be born, and he's born of a very good
Anga.
Anga.
Yeah,
King.
yeah, that is why half was bad, half
yes.
was right. So the other half was not.
Yeah, other half you say it's lineage you're talking about. But when you said death personified trouble, like usually you think of Yamraj or Krishna himself. You don't think about a bad person. I just want
that.
Yes, in this context, it means that it's a cruel person.
Yeah, it's a cruel person. That's
as
what it
cruel
looks
as
like.
Death. As cruel as death.
Yeah, yeah. Because there isn't any other, at least Prabhupada is not saying anything else here. Mitra. Of death. God of death. second. Yeah, nothing else is being spoken here. Let's see if Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is saying anything more. Otherwise, yeah, my understanding is that he's just a bad person, cruel person. Yeah, okay. Anything else?
Yes, true.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much for
Thank
joining.
you.
Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyo cha. Ditanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Koti Vaishnava ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. That's Hare